welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large, coming at you for yet another slam-bang episode of greatness and fun, brought to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and with video here on YouTube. And those of you who are watching can see that I am joined in studio for I think only the second time here since I've opened this place up by my friend Yuval Laor. Yes. I struggle with the pronunciation, but don't worry, I butcher everybody's name.
That's fine.
And Dr. Laor is actually Doctor of Cultural Studies?
Culture Studies, yeah.
Great, excellent. And he, you might recall, joined me a couple years ago. We did an amazing podcast episode that I think holds up. I think it's one of the best podcasts I've ever done. On the topic of L. Ron Hubbard and what we suspected, you had a theory on Hubbard suffering from temporal lobe epilepsy. And that could have been a root cause. And we're not saying 100% that it's absolutely the case that was that way, because we don't have his brain to look at. But all the symptomology was there, and we went over all of that. And I just thought that was a great episode. Mm-hmm. And I thought I should bring Yuval back because he has done a doctorate thesis. Your doctorate thesis was on the subject of fervor, an evolution of that.
The psychology of fervor, the capacity for fervor.
Right. Yeah. And so I, of course, have been talking all about that subject in different ways. I've not used the word fervor in most of the talk that I've done. I've talked about extremism, prisons of belief, kind of authoritative thinking, high control groups, cults, all that kind of stuff. But underlying all of that are these base emotions and ideas and behaviors that we all kind of engage in to one degree or another in different parts of our life. And so really this subject has something to do with all of us, not just those weirdo extremists that you see on the internet or on Scientology and the aftermath. And this is something I just love bringing out in the open and talking about and trying to help educate on these topics, because I think that all of us can live slightly better and more fruitful lives if we understand ourselves better. And I'm always on the hunt for that. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just dive in. What was the basis of your doctoral thesis, and what's the idea here?
You mentioned those three things. You said it's those beliefs, behaviors, and that fervor might be, but it was none of the three. I don't remember. I think it is a psychological state
that affects behavior and affects.
And it's I'm going to tie it, as you will see soon, into different types of love and child psychology. But I think that we need to think of the state of fervor like the state of infatuated romantic love, for example.
Great.
It's something that can last months, maybe even a year, maybe days, but it is not an event, and it's not a behavior. It is a state that you can be in for a certain amount of time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's get into that then, because clearly that state of being leads to dedicated work or behavior on the part of people for years.
Yeah.
I was in Scientology for 27 years.
For sure.
And
I'm not sure that you were in the psychological state of fervor the whole time.
Correct. Yes. And I'm glad we're differentiating that. Perfect. Right? Because when I first got involved as a 15-year-old, I was always involved as a child, but really getting on board when they really got me into that state was when I was 15.
Yeah, and that's when it's easiest to get.
Exactly. So let's talk about that. What is that state? And
okay, so I think that to understand, so fervor is the infatuated mode of a more general state, which I will call a belief attachment.
Okay.
That's the current term I'm using. And a belief attachment is related in an evolutionary sense, certain evolutionary sense, to the different types of love, or some of the types of love. So the types of love are parent to child, there's child to parent, which is very different, There's teenager to parent,
which is very different. Anybody who has teenagers knows, whereas anybody who's ever been a teenager knows.
There's romantic love, which is very similar and very different in very interesting ways to parental love and child-to-parent love. Or there's love between siblings. There's love extended family members, and in humans, there's also an expansion, so we can love our country, we can love God, we can love our car, we can love a sports team.
And that seems to be unique to Homo sapiens.
Well, so this expansion of the capacity of different types of love is actually something that you see in domesticated animals.
Oh, of course. Of course. Just as you were saying that, I started thinking about dogs.
Yeah,
because we share this almost a symbiotic relationship with dogs.
And we love our dogs.
Yes.
And our dogs can love us.
Cats, not so much. But dogs? I mean, we can love the cats, but sometimes it's a little questionable.
So first of all, realizing that in some ways we are closest to chimpanzees and bonobos.
Sure.
But in other ways we are closer to other domesticated animals because we are domesticated as well.
Good point.
So what happens when you domesticate an animal is domestication is all about reducing aggression, usually. And the way the aggression is reduced in domesticated animals, in many of them, maybe bees, maybe different, but is that domesticated animals can see anybody as a relative.
Right.
And they don't have aggression towards their relatives. So if you take a bobcat out in the mountains, the bobcat is aggressive towards everybody except its kittens or its mother or its siblings.
Right.
And if you take a domesticated cat, the domesticated cat loves you, and maybe you love it, but it sometimes behaves to you as if you're its parent. Mm-hmm. So when it purrs or when it does the
little paw thing. Yeah.
Sometimes when it fights with you, it's like a sibling.
Yeah.
And when the cat grooms in front of you, or when it brings you less and less damaged prey, so that you will finish the hunting, trying to teach you how to hunt. Right. It behaves as if it is your parent. And what domestication does to animals is that it can, first of all, they can love much more, a bigger variety of things. Mm-hmm. They can be, domesticated animals can behave as adolescents throughout their lives. Mm-hmm. They can display like child psychology. So a domesticated cat, as an adult, it can behave like a kitten. Mm-hmm. A bobcat will never behave like a kitten once it's an adult.
Right.
And that's why you can adopt and be adopted by a cat throughout your life and its life. Mm-hmm. Because you can always be in that stage of life. Now, bobcats can adopt other species, right? There is a lot of interspecies, but it has to happen at the right time of life.
Got it.
For the animal.
Okay.
This also domestication made it so that we can show inappropriate types of love. We can love our country like a child. We can love our parents like a parent loves a child, even though we're both adults. We can have all sorts of combinations of the types of love.
Right. So, I'd never thought about love of country in different types or ways. That's a really good point. Or love of organizations, or love of your club, or your group. Yeah, or your water ski, or whatever.
Or Scientology.
That's our Scientology, that's right.
Or Hubbard, yeah.
Right.
That is the beginning. And now there's two types of love, the parent to child and child to parent, which have two modes. Mm-hmm. They have an infatuated mode and a sober mode.
Okay.
So
fairly self-explanatory modes for once in science.
Yeah, even though there's a lot of arguments in science about that. But in the romantic love, for example, there is a mode that Dorothy Tennov calls limerence, which is, and she invented the word limerence in her 1977 book, because she thought that this is not what we call love.
Ah.
This is, and she said that a limerent person, he loves the limerent object. It sometimes can be called being in love.
Mm-hmm.
But you love the limerent object, and she calls it an object because you don't see it as it really is. The person that you are in an infatuated love relationship, you can have major blind spots regarding.
You don't say. What? Love is blind? I've never heard of that before.
There's a joke, why is divorce so expensive? Because it's worth the money.
I've been there, done that. Yeah, okay.
People can be astonished at how big of a mistake they made when they were blinded by limerence, in this case.
Right.
So this would be infatuated romantic love. Now, with the infatuated parental love, you also have this, and they both come with a sense of certainty. But, so the Romeo is certain that Juliet is for him.
Mm-hmm.
The parent, there's a story which I read it in a book, but I don't know which book it was. So and I need to find out. Well, if maybe someone knows the book, they can
let us know in the comments.
And the story is about a group of parents who are going to adopt babies in China, and they go to the orphanage and they stand in line, and each couple gets to the line and gets handed a baby. Then they go back to the hotel, they stay in the night, and then the next morning, in the morning, they all get together and they say that woman handing out babies, she was a genius, because she knew which baby to give to each couple. Now, they know that the babies were given out randomly.
Right.
But they cannot imagine loving another baby as much as they love the baby that they got. They got a certainty that that's the one for them.
Right.
Even though they know that. But so there's this feeling of certainty that comes, but it's a very specific type of certainty. And we'll get to other types of certainty that...
I won't segue off into the hinterlands here about how you found the one and only for you, your soulmate. There couldn't be any other one. It sounds like that goes into this.
Yeah, but that also happens with faith. It also happens with fervor or belief attachment. So we have in romantic love and parental love, we have this infatuated mode. And the parental love, the infatuated mode, is when you think your child got injured and you got super motivated, super... but normally when, you have a sober parental attachment.
Would you say that it would be accurate that maybe after the first year or first few months is when it goes from infatuated mode to sober mode?
Normally, yeah.
Kind of when and this is expressed, I think, in marriage with, the honeymoon's over now.
Yeah, so and that's when limerence, this kind of... infatuated love with blind spots and all sorts of, sensitivity to criticism, all sorts of things that we can get to later. It settles into the sober mode.
Okay.
But with children, first of all, you can love someone romantically without ever having gone through the infatuated mode.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that it's a different type of love.
Okay.
So it's not that it's a necessary aspect. And parents sometimes get into this parental infatuation when they find out that there's a pregnancy, sometimes when birth happens, and sometimes later.
Okay.
So, and there are a lot of people who don't feel that immediately towards their kids, and that is also seems like it might be more common in domesticated animals. But in wild animals, the parental love settles down as the kids need to be let go.
Right.
In domesticated animals, it's a lot less.
Well,
a lot less structured.
You know, I know there's a peril in talking about or looking into evolution, that you can make up stories for why evolutionary developments happen. You kind of, well, this sounds like it makes sense.
Yeah.
So then that's the story everybody goes with, right? Nothing scientific about that. You got to experiment. You got to figure things out. But
observe.
It sounds as though, to me, with what I've been learning and knowing about this, that there's clear evolutionary reason for this. I mean, you want that infatuated mode because your full attention and focus is on this other being or living thing, or non-living thing, as we'll get to. And you're just directed on, putting all your effort into making sure it survives, it's doing well.
And it's common to all mammals. And but sometimes, or in many cases, fathers don't have that.
Right.
So
you'll see that with baboon troops. Sapolsky talks about that.
Yeah. So in about 5% of mammals and 90% of birds, or so, we have also romantic love. So both parents raise the child. And there's also cooperative breeders, and this is where these are even more rare in animals like meerkats or marmosets or humans, but not chimpanzees. You have a whole group raises the child.
Oh, it takes a village sort of attitude.
Yeah, and there's grandparents, there's friends of the family, and there's different roles, and there's so things are already more flexible in those animals, but domestication makes the love relationships even more flexible.
Okay, cool. So how do we go from these modes of love to fervor?
So there's a new mode of love that I think came about, and the elements in the evolutionary toolbox that went into constructing it were the different types of love, specifically parental love and romantic love, which are also related to each other, of course. Now, child-to-parent love and child psychology in general also is a big contributor to this, and symbolic language. So symbolic language, which really changes a lot of things, interacted with all those types of love in child psychology to bring us a new type of love, in a way, where this new type of love is... I call the sober mode a belief attachment, and the infatuated mode I call fervor. Okay.
And so we start getting to the heart of the matter here.
Yes. So fervor is like the limerent person, the person who is infatuated romantically in love. They are like the person, like a parent whose child is distressed, and they. It's a very motivating state. It is very goal-directed. You can seem like you're selfish. It can make you neglect other obligations, other commitments. I have a list of commonalities.
Yeah, go ahead and pull them out, because I'd actually like to go through some of those. A point I'd like to make right now is that I'm asked all the time, even to this day. I've done whole videos and talks about this, but I'm continually asked, why do people fall for this stuff? How can they be so stupid, right? And, one of the points I want to get across here with this and other things we've talked about is the potential or capacity for this kind of thing to happen is in all of us. It's just a matter of hitting the right marks for the individual, right? We're not all going to fall in love romantically with every other person. We don't have that potential, but we have the potential to fall in love.
Yeah, and
if you hit the right markers, right?
There might be some, diseases or neurological conditions that make you unable to do that as well.
Fair enough. I'm speaking broadly, I'm painting with a very broad brush, but of course, practically everything I ever talk about, I should say, statistically speaking,
or
right?
among healthy people.
Yeah, because there's always exceptions to these rules.
And when you're a week old, you don't have symbolic language, and when you're all sorts of nitpicky stuff. So so first of all, the irrationality that you talk about, how would people believe this? we can, if we look at fervor or belief attachment as related in similar ways to love, let's say parental love, you're not going to ask a parent, how could you,
right?
How could you love
How
that?
could you love that baby of yours? What is wrong with
He turned out to be Hitler,
Right. Well, it's actually a thing because even the parents of serial killers or mass shooters or these guys, they're what? Yeah, he's my kid. I'm sorry. I love him. It's horrible what he did, but
and well, sometimes it's horrible what he did, but sometimes it's also I don't believe that he actually did that.
Yes,
even though they actually helped him hide from the police. So if you look at parental infatuation, if you look at people in cults, I say that we need to think of cult members as psychologically similar to parents of evil alien children.
Interesting. Okay.
So if a parent of this horrible, alien baby that's actually here to destroy, Rosemary's Baby kind of a...
Right. The Antichrist.
And the parent doesn't see the flaws in the kid. Gives everything to the kid, all his time, all his money, because the kid is distressed, so he needs to work, gives up all his money to help the kid, because the kid is sick, you need to finance. They lie for the kid. They break the law for the kid. The kid can abuse them, but they still stick with it.
Yeah.
The kid can be, just this monster, but they are... And they don't see the problems. They lie on their behalf. And if the kid passes away, they are devastated.
Yeah.
And yet, if you see such a parent, normal people in society say, well, I understand that.
Right.
That's the love of a parent.
Exactly.
Now, if we think of a cult member as someone who gives everything to the cult, who doesn't see the faults of the cult, who breaks the law for the cult, but lies on behalf of the cult, is abused by the cult, and when the cult kicks them out, they are completely devastated, or if the cult, breaks up.
Yeah.
People ask me, well, why was that gullible idiot?
There you go. See? That's the connection right there.
Well, that is a connection.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there are, of course, very, very big differences between... so let's first talk about some of the similarities.
Sure.
And I don't want to miss any, so I have
got some notes here that we're consulting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it just so that...
Absolutely. What you got?
Okay, so I'm talking about similarities between parental attachment, which has infatuated and sober mode, romantic attachment, which can have a limerence, infatuated mode, and a sober mode, and belief attachment, where you are attached to, for example, Scientology or a tech, where the attachment is to a belief system, which is many times personified as a person, like Hubbard, like God.
Good point there, actually, because cult leaders are revered.
Yes, and but the cult member many times when they're in the cult, they will see the cult leader as a parental figure.
Yes, and in fact, we've talked about the fact that cult leaders try to make that relationship happen by calling themselves father or mother, referring to the followers as their children.
Yeah.
Right? It's a purposeful effort on the part of malicious cult leaders to create that parental relationship.
And there's age regression, there's all sorts of things that make you feel like you're young when you're on your knees, you're the height you are when you're young, when you're all sorts of, there's postures, there's, so that Scientologist who sees Hubbard as a parental figure, and they have a childlike dependence on them. At the same time, they can have a fervor which resemble parent-to-child relationship with the group.
Okay.
With Scientology. So you go into Scientology, you think you'll be able to depend on Hubbard, but then you find out that Scientology and all of humanity depends on you.
Right.
So
Right.
you're at the same time you are in a child role with Hubbard and a parental role with Scientology. That's why you need to give, and the type of giving that cult members give is the kind that parents give to their children.
That's a great
Not
point.
the kind that children give to their parents.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. Because I tell you, man, I mean, having lived it, that's very, very true. I certainly can relate to what you're talking about in terms of my personal attitude, especially at the level of the C organization.
Mm-hmm.
First as a staff member, but then really moving up to the 24/7 operation of the Sea Org, how I considered myself in a sort of a caretaking, salvation bringing.
And everything depends on you.
Yes, everything, right? People ask, how do you suffer? Yeah, how do you suffer all the abuses? How do you live through 3 years of the RPF? How do you take being beaten by people? How do you take the long hours? And you go, well, would you do that for your kid? Of course you would, right? That's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's a very tragic way to think about
Well,
it.
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying this is a big, all kinds of plus signs here.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it's a really good way of defining that relationship.
So if we're talking about these three types of attachments, and now we're going to talk about things that they share in common, but later we can talk about things that they don't share in common.
Yeah.
So all three of them have an underlying emotion.
Okay.
And it's actually a group of emotions. So love, parental love, romantic love, they both have the underlying emotion is also called love. But it's a collection of emotion that includes, caring and all sorts of different types of emotions that we collectively call them love. Mm-hmm. And in the case of fervor and belief attachment, the underlying emotion is awe.
Awe,
and
A-W-E.
Yeah, and it's also a collection of emotions. So that includes wonder, mystery, effervescence. There's all sorts of types of related emotions that are collectively, I'm going to refer to as awe.
And that's not even a point of minutia or a difficult point for cult members to understand. Mm-hmm. In numerous success stories, you bring this word up and I start thinking, in numerous success stories and speeches that Scientologists gave, they would say outright, I am in awe of L. Ron Hubbard. I am in awe that I was lucky enough to find this place and be part of this, and I am just floored by.
And I had a win.
Yes, exactly. They express a feeling of overwhelming joy and happiness and relief that they are where they are and have experienced what they are experiencing, and they feel very lucky to be in that position. So that completely is real for a cult experience.
Yeah, so this is the underlying emotion.
Yeah.
As I said, there's two modes, infatuated and sober, and these attachments, they're a little bit also like habits in that there's a feedback between the emotions and the behavior and the experiences.
Okay.
Okay, that can reinforce itself. With time, the infatuated mode tends to settle into the sober mode.
Sure.
But there are mechanisms and ways for people to be stuck in the infatuated mode.
And do you think that, let me ask you a question here, just since it occurs to me right off, do you think this is one of the reasons why, say in Scientology, they have every couple months they're having another international event where they're going to pump everybody up, show them all the bullshit statistics about expansion and how wonderful everything is, and to give this amazing audio-visual presentation.
With a crowd.
Yes, to a crowd of people at an event where there's thousands of people in the room at once. Exactly. Yeah. So they're bringing all their A game to these events. Do you think that's part of what we're talking about here?
It is to induce awe, but I think that it is possible for someone to remain stuck in a cult, even though they're no longer fervent, when, and this is Alexandra Staines from her book, when the person doesn't have alternative attachments.
Right.
So when they're isolated and when they're engulfed.
Right. Which would
Okay.
lead to why isolation is a key component of being in a cult,
Yes.
because it reinforces the behavior and the belief.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't allow you to switch to another attachment relationship, escape hatch attachment,
Right.
as it is called. So, but what I'm gonna say is that in Stein's description of cultic psychology, she talks about the person who is isolated, engulfed, and terrorized, and it gets both terror and love alternating. I think that those are necessary for a person who's not in the state of fervor.
Makes
When
sense.
you're in the state of fervor, which can be the first few months, the first few years, or something you come back to every once in a while as part of your involvement, then in that psychology, the isolation and the engulfment comes from the fervor.
Okay.
So that's a window that the cult has, right? You saw a miracle, you had a conversion, you're now in a fervent state, you're gung-ho, there's 2 months where you're going to be in this state, and they need to isolate you and engulf you, actually,
Right.
in those 2 months,
Right.
so that when you fall out of the fervor and you're just in a sober belief mode, that you will, you're stuck there, because now you're isolated and engulfed. But the fervor takes care of the transition period, where you still, that's when you break up with your parents. That's when when you burn all the other bridges, where you move to a different place, you become engulfed, because now you're in the Sea Org. So fervor can play a transition role, but once you're isolated and engulfed, you don't need the fervor anymore.
Makes
Yeah.
complete sense. Yeah, because then you're
stuck.
again, as a Sea Org member, I can totally relate. Then you're stuck.
Yeah,
Because then there's no support system outside of the group.
yeah,
The entire group's thinking is all on the same page. So you're going to, just that alone, you don't want to feel like an outsider. You don't want to feel different. You don't want to be the lemming who's not going over the cliff. Right?
of course.
So it totally makes sense.
Okay, so let's see what other similarities. In all three of them, there's a strong commitment. But in the parental love and romantic love, the commitment is to another person. In the case of belief attachment and fervor, the infatuated mode, the attachment, many times it is personified in a person, but it is an attachment to the truth value of a certain ideas or the truth value of whatever that person says.
Right.
So you can love, your husband, your child, but you think they're wrong.
Right.
But that's because those attachments aren't, they happen before symbolic language. Symbolic language, you have a new type of certainty, a new type of feeling of knowing.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So it's not just certainty that Juliet is for Romeo. It's a certainty that everything Hubbard ever said is correct.
Exactly. That's right.
And that is a different type of commitment.
Right.
sometimes.
Or everything in the Bible is literally
Yeah.
true. Or everything in the Quran must be followed word for
communism,
word.
yeah.
Or, communism, same deal, right? Same
Yeah.
level of fervor.
And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. So fervor, I'm not giving any value judgment. You can have a very good, political fervor to help people. Fervor it's on itself, it's not positive or negative.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's a really, really important point. This again goes to the critical thinking aspect of things, right? Context is king. None of this stuff can be evaluated in terms of black and white thinking. You have to look at the context of the fervor and the context of the consequences of it. Are we doing good things as a result of this, positive things, constructive things, or are we going off the rails and writing hate websites on people and stalking them and things like that, right? So you can, good point.
So when you're in the infatuated state of those three types of attachments, things are very important. You're very motivated. You're very goal-directed. It can make you seem like you're selfish. It can make you neglect other commitments you have. That is common to all of them, and it's unclear which one is stronger. Sometimes families get people out of cults. Sometimes cults get people out of families. You know, it's
True.
It's,
True that.
but the understanding the fervor can help predict that. Let's see. So I went through that. So all three of them give people a sense of meaning and purpose.
Yep.
Which is both, which is also a reward system. So it feels good. It gives you, makes you, and
Get
not
that dopamine going.
dopamine, but it's a specific kind of meaning and purpose. All three of them include blind spots.
Okay, let's talk about those.
So there are many sources of blind spots. There is cognitive dissonance avoidance. There's motivated reasoning. There's biases, but
we've never talked about any of those things here.
But with parental love, especially, or most clearly, you have a blind spot that the parent doesn't see the faults
Right.
in the child, so that the parent does not, and even if they do, they see it in a positive way, or you know,
It's a feature, not a bug.
yeah, or rose-colored glasses, you know. And this is also, you see it in limerence. So in Infatuated Romantic Love, in that book, Love and Limerence, she talks about how, and she interviews a lot of people who have been in that state. And there's a woman who says that it's really good that the person she's in love with, that he's unattractive. Because that makes it so that he's less likely to look for other girls, or that other girls are less likely to, you know, so there's all sorts of...
It's all about rebranding in your mind as to why these are features, not bugs.
But this type of blind spot seems to be, in addition to the other regular types of blind spots. Okay. So with the parents not seeing the faults of in their baby is a very, you know, extra special blind spot, and I think that can happen also in belief and fervor, especially in fervor.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you talk about Scientology. It's filled with contradictions.
Yeah.
Filled with them. I mean, there's just tons of them, all littered throughout all of Hubbard's work.
But you need to not see them.
Well, yes, and Scientologists don't. They will, and I used to tell people, I used to think to myself, this is an integrated whole, there's nothing contradictory, it's just a developmental line, things changed as he learned new things, you know, and there's a certain value, there's a certain truth value to what I'm saying there. But at the same time, the final work, the guy, you know, says in 1965, it's a done deal. It all works, it's beautiful, the only reason it's not working is because you're not doing it right. Okay, fair enough, but then what about this and this and this and this and this? Like, it's not a finished work, and it doesn't all work, and there are tons of contradictions, and once you get out of that infatuation with it, you know, once the awe kind of goes away and you're out of, even like me, you're out of the sober mode even, you can see it for what it is.
Yep.
You know, but when you're in it, you literally can't see these things. It's very hard to get across. I mean, this is what interventions are all about, is getting people out of it enough to...
And sometimes that blindness can make you not see things that are central to your belief. So, for example, if you have someone who believes in the prosperity gospel of Christianity, they can have an experience. You know, they're shaking on the floor of the church, and I don't want to. Again, I'm not. And that proves to them that the Bible is true, that the pastor, what he says is true, that they're living with the right way, and if you ask them, so do you believe that you should give all your money to the poor, like it says in the Bible? And many of them don't give all their money to the poor. And the prosperity gospel says that God came to make them rich, right? So you can have, and it's very important to be able to ignore central aspects of your faith, because sometimes your faith says that you can rely on God to provide for you.
Right.
But you should not. You should not act on that belief. And so it's a very, very interesting type of blindness that can happen, and because of the necessity to keep this certainty of all these aspects, you develop a sensitivity to criticism.
Boy, I've never seen that on Facebook. I've never engaged in that on Facebook. We haven't brought this up at all. We haven't mentioned this extremely dirty word. But we talked about ideals or beliefs and how you can have this type of love or awe for them. Would this apply to politics?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
It can. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to get that out there. Sort of throw that dead fish on the table for everybody to argue over now. But, if you're ever wondering when you're on Facebook or social media and you're interacting with people who have opposite beliefs, left or right, I'm not going to make some stand on Trump here right now. I'm talking about both sides. And you're sitting there just gnashing your teeth. Like your fillings are falling out because you're gnashing your teeth so much over the frustration you feel at this person who touts the Bible or touts some, touts
or as a Scientologist. But if you think of this kind of fervor or belief attachment as something that's related to other types of love, then to insult someone's cult, to tell them your cult sucks, is like telling someone that their baby is ugly.
Exactly.
They're not going to listen to you.
There you go.
Anymore afterwards, even if you're right.
Exactly. What do you mean? They stopped listening as soon as you said your baby's ugly.
Yeah,
that's it. You're done.
And it makes things difficult.
Yes. Yes, there have been some strained relationships in the United States over the last couple of years over all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why you shouldn't insult people's religion. So there are some people who say that as an atheist, you need to go out and tell people that their belief is irrational and stupid and evil and all that. But I think that if you're doing it without being very, very careful and without realizing that they might not even see aspects of what they're doing because of blind spots, because then you're not going to change people's minds.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I've failed more often than I've succeeded at trying to practice what I preach with that, but he's absolutely right.
Yeah. So in this fervent state, for example, but also in the others, of course, you can get intrusive thoughts. You can get obsessive addiction-like behaviors. People want to be in these states. People want to be in love. People want to be.
It feels
have
amazing.
Yeah, I know. And there's a very interesting relationship with stress and trauma with them. So stress can increase the level of infatuation. So you can be relaxed and everything's good, and your kid's in school and everything's fine. You're in a sober parental attachment, but you hear that there's emergency. Suddenly, the stress brings back the infatuation. It can re-trigger it. And many groups make people feel guilty or stress them chronically, so that they will be continuously more likely to stay in this fervent state.
Right.
But so this is a moderate level of stress can lead to that, but a sufficiently strong traumatic event. This is not chronic stress. This is can either strengthen or it can lead to a conversion. So we'll get to.
Or maybe like a deconversion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is
this explains why people leave the cults.
So
I mean, one reason.
Yeah, that's one.
Because they have a shocking shift that causes them to reevaluate. Wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
And then, I'm out. I mean, that's what happened to me.
Yeah, but it needs to be interpreted in a certain way.
Right.
We'll get into how those states start out.
Cool.
Let's see. So all of these states can come about gradually, but they can also kind of come about very suddenly and abruptly.
Okay.
And when that happens, that is a very emotional event, right? So think about a very fast conversion, where someone goes to intensive of the Moonies and comes out a different person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's what Steve Hassan talks about. They literally would take you to another location, isolate you, do the conversion thing.
Yeah, and then now.
Yeah.
Now that and of course you can fall in love at first sight, romantically.
Sure.
More commonly when you're a teenager, and you can fall in love suddenly when you become a parent.
Sure.
So that can happen with a pregnancy and a childbirth, sort of a gradual with points, but it can also be with adoption, where outside your door there's a baby, and the next day you're a changed person.
That's right. That's right. It's absolutely right.
So when that event happens, people can change their life really, really drastically, really suddenly, and really fundamentally.
Yeah.
And it's more likely to happen when people are young adults.
Right. And this is strewn throughout media, movies, TV. I mean, this is a well-known thing. Teenagers going half-cocked off on joining some cult or group or something they
Or
get
falling
involved
in
in,
love.
or falling in love. Exactly. What do
And
you
sometimes
mean,
it's the worst part. The worst
yeah, this Romeo guy, I don't know about this guy, you know. Mom, he's the best. He's a dream.
Well, they're both dead by the end of the play, right? So,
Right, didn't really have great consequences.
yeah, but historically, that's why that kind of romantic love and infatuation was something that societies thought was very dangerous and very
Right.
problematic. Yeah.
Right, as reflected in Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, there you go. Shakespeare's saying, hey man, maybe cool your jets. Maybe hold off a little bit.
These are what are similar
Okay.
between these states. But with fervor, it's a lot more complicated because your commitment can be to a belief system which can sometimes not have any figures. It can sometimes not to be personified, but many times it is personified, even if it's Marxism,
Right.
even if it's Jesus, even if it's Hubbard.
We did a podcast recently here where I talked to my friend John P. about sovereign citizens. And this is a group of folks who have adopted an incredibly insane belief system having to do with the law and legal terms and stuff, but there is no central leadership.
No.
But it is definitely cult-like. I mean, all the characteristics are there,
Yeah.
right?
Well, there's
and
the-
they act nuts. you
There's
know?
the Ayn Rand cult, right?
There she and she's dead. Yeah, and there's no central leadership.
And she had a cult in her life too,
Right.
of where everybody. So with fervor, with this kind of attachment, first of all, it increases drastically the variability of culture. You can have a group of people or an individual, but also a group that can act as if there's a horrible emergency when there is no emergency. But you can also have people who are completely calm and nonchalant when there really is an emergency. You know? So there is with fervor, it's just a lot more diverse, and people can believe in almost anything with the right circumstances. So if I talk about this conversion event, right? So first of all, the same kind of experience can sometimes strengthen your infatuation or your belief, or it can lead to a conversion to another belief. Now, these are similar experiences, but it is like you can fall in love for the second time with your wife and do a second honeymoon and have a falling in love event. And falling in love is how families start. But falling in love is also how families end. when one of them falls in love with the neighbor.
Oh, right.
So
that never happens. What are you talking about?
yeah, and people say that in a society where limerence, with this kind of infatuated love, is the basis for people to have relationship or to be married, that's also will be the basis for why people divorce when they are limerent with someone else later in their life.
That's right.
So that the same there's a similarity between how you join a group and how you leave a group, how you and it's just the ability to change drastically and there are, Margaret Singer says that it's not that there are some people who tend to be in cults and some people who tend not to be in cults, but there's people who it's very easy for them to join, and for them it's easy to leave. There's people, for them it's harder to join, but then for them it's harder to leave.
Right.
So
makes sense. I think I'd fall in that camp at this point, given all my trust issues with all this crap,
yeah.
you know.
And it took you 27 years, but
Exactly.
you were 15.
That's right.
So what I'm talking about is about an experience that proves to you that something like, for example, Scientology is correct, which is a very strange kind of experience, right?
It is, and that's interesting. I commented on this, I think, in last week's podcast about the fact that I'm sure there's a lot of ways to explain this. One way I looked at it was there's just a logical fallacy that occurs where if some of it works, we make the unwarranted assumption that all of it must work, even if we don't know what all of it even consists of. And I think this emotional investment that we're talking about explains why we're prone to such a fallacy.
Yeah, and it's a specific type of psychology. But if we look at awe experiences, so first of all, I'll say that what triggers, establishes these attachments is completely different, right? So what creates romantic love and what creates parental love are different things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. We certainly hope so.
Yes. But so it makes sense that this new type of love also has completely different triggers.
Sure.
Okay, so in that department, it would be expected that would be, but the once it is triggered, especially a sufficiently strong experience, it can feel like a objective truth, like you saw the light, like and it's not just real; it's really real.
Right.
You know?
Super real.
Yeah.
It's very in your face.
And but the trigger is not related to the conclusion.
Okay.
All right.
Let's give an example.
Let's do let's say 3 atheists.
Okay.
Get together, and there's a bowl of sugar on the table.
All right.
One of them knocks the sugar, and the sugar falls on the floor, and on the floor it spells out the word truth.
Okay.
This is a thought experiment.
1 in a trillion chance, and it happens.
Whatever.
Yeah, sure.
You can see that one person can see that, have an experience, and become a Catholic.
Sure.
The other person next to him, also an atheist, also believes in everything that the first person believes, has the experience, and becomes a Muslim.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And the third person might not trust, might remain an atheist, say that they're magnets, that's not sugar, that there's
it was a 1 in a trillion.
LSD flashback.
Yeah, million monkeys, million typewriters. They're gonna type the Bible before too long. Yeah.
So the different, but you can see that the same miracle or perceived miracle can lead one person to see it as a proof that Christianity is true.
Yes.
The other one sees it as a proof that Hinduism is true, or Islam is true. And yet there's the same experience.
Right.
Now, in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, there's one event where people come to the wrong conclusion of the miracle. Usually people know what the miracle is supposed to mean, right? So when Moses parts the Red Sea, people know that means we need to get circumcised, right? But
I'm sorry, that was very funny.
Yeah, but this is before the Bible. The Bible gets introduced later in the story. Right. So Judaism is just about that. But when Jesus walks on the water, he walks towards his disciples who are on a boat. And in the biblical story, they see him walking on the water and they think that they're seeing a ghost.
Oh.
And then he makes it up to the boat and says, no, it's not a ghost, it's me, Jesus. Okay? So they thought that this miracle proves that ghosts exist.
Right.
But you were wrong. This miracle proves something else that's not related to the buoyancy of Jesus,
Sure.
Right? And you can also imagine someone who sees Jesus walking on the water from far away, and they don't know what to make of it, but they know something really mysterious happened. And then 20 years later, they join Scientology, and they say, "Oh, that's what that meant."
Right.
That was OT powers.
Right. Exactly.
So this awe and feeling of knowing can even be suspended, where you know that meant something. You don't know what it is yet, but then later you can have an experience, and then you interpret the miracle retroactively
Right.
as something. So if we ask what is going on here, right? Now, and there's at this point I'll say that there's a lot of ways to induce awe. So perceiving a miracle is just one way.
Yep.
So there's
Well, you can take a personality test.
Yeah.
And have somebody show you their results and tell you all about yourself and go, what?
Or have a trauma, or meet a celebrity, or vastness.
Right.
So
Tons and tons of ways.
And we can get into that later, because that's, of course, a very interesting subject. But if we ask what is going on with this, in this case it was a miracle, but I saw the miracle, and that proved to me things that are not related. So first of all, we can ask, well, how do you know what it's going to prove? So the way I think about it is that you have a default conclusion that you will get. So you can be an atheist, that if you see a miracle, Protestant Christianity, that's what you'll conclude from it. But another atheist, they're still an atheist, but if they see a miracle, that's something else. So this is sort of a default that they will conclude if they see something that's sufficiently anomalous.
Okay. Would you say that their default position would rely on their background, education, culture, experience, etc.?
Yes, but that default can be changed temporarily.
Okay.
So, for example, a person normally, if they have a very, very strong awe experience, they will become a Christian. But now they came to the ashram, and they know that everybody in the ashram, they believe that the guru is God. And they don't believe that the guru is God, but now, because of the context, because of the situation, because of the people around them, now if they will have that type of experience, then the guru is God would be the conclusion that they'll get. So a person can, if they have a strong emotional experience like that, normally be a Christian, but now they're in a Scientology org. And it's very easy to say, okay, if I see a miracle now, okay, I'll believe that, because you haven't seen the miracle. You don't believe it yet, but you change your default, how you'll react to a miracle. And so...
Well, this is how Scientologists are made.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because the church goes way out of their way. Hubbard went way out of his way to interpret the events you're experiencing in a very particular way. Oh, you're feeling a little odd and the hair's standing up? You must be exterior.
Yeah.
You have an out-of-body
experience.
That's right.
That means that everything Hubbard ever wrote is correct.
Exactly. Nailed it.
There you go.
That's how it works.
But it really feels like that. And this is not a question of the intelligence of the person. This is not, it is sort of like accepting a baby with all of its properties. You accept Scientology and you don't even know what it is.
Right.
You can believe with all your heart in things that you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And in that, that state is related to child psychology. So a child, you can be a 3-year-old who's a Christian, who knows nothing.
Or a 4-year-old Scientologist,
you can be a 4-year-old Scientologist.
That's right. Quit being bakey. What's that, Mommy? It's the bad part of your mind. Okay.
But
that's how it worked.
And you defer to your parental figure.
Yeah.
To be the one that your worldview is determined by.
Right.
And you can get that kind of psychological state where you're not even fully aware that you don't know what Scientology is. But you see what other people are doing, and you can always ask an authority figure if you have questions. And but and this is for sudden conversion. Slow conversion is a different story, and it's a complicated story. So maybe we'll
say that for later.
In Scientology, if what determines what you conclude from the experience is expectations and assumptions. And the strength of expectations of assumptions can be very, of course, very strong. So if you want to think of the difference between someone who has taken LSD a number of times, they know a little bit about what it does in the brain, and they're taking it knowingly and they're expecting it to happen. Compare that with someone who doesn't know that such a thing exists and someone puts some LSD in their coffee.
Right.
Those are fundamentally different experiences.
Yes.
Those are you can say that they're both psychedelic, LSD-induced experiences, drastically different.
Yes.
Very, very drastically
That's right.
different.
Would you say that that might be why I should be stressing, and when I talk about these groups, informed consent?
Well, always.
Yeah.
You should always.
Well, I mean, just the example you just gave is
Yeah.
exactly what I'm talking about with that.
Yeah, but I mean, in there's many different contexts that
Of course. Of course.
comes into play. But
I just can't think of too many contexts where it would be okay morally, from a moral position, to slip LSD into somebody's coffee.
that's right. But with and there are cults that do that, by the way.
I know. Because then they can interpret the event
Exactly.
according to their scriptures.
And the LSD causes hallucinations interpreted as miracles.
Right.
And in Scientology, you just stare at something for hours to create the hallucinations
That's right.
that will be interpreted.
That's right.
You know.
Exactly.
Or you use your own internal pharmacy, you know,
Right.
to create an abnormal experiences through whatever. And those are actual very, you know, like sensory deprivation, like, you know, the TRs do that. And there's repetition.
Yeah, transinduction.
Transinduction, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Auditing does that as well.
Yeah,
There's
auditing,
forms of
yeah.
auditing where it's just nothing
course.
but transinduction.
yeah.
And then people afterwards swear by it because they are interpreting it according to the context L. Ron Hubbard gave it, rather
There
than
you
what
go.
it objectively is doing.
Yes, but that is not that is not because of you know, gullibility of the person. This is not.
Right.
This is
Right.
This is a certain construction where things feel like they're really real,
Good.
and this is a mechanism that I think is related to parental love, romantic love, where it is designed to override
Yes.
any
Yes.
doubts you have regarding the commitment that has been
Yes.
established. If we ask how is awe induced, right? So what induces awe? Because it's a strange collection of things, right? So there's vastness. Are you swimming in the ocean and you see a whale, and it can be a celebrity. You know, you walk down the street, you see Mick Jagger and everybody else. Crowds amplify this, but this is any emotion. And you can have, with awe, you can have an emotional experience that you know should not have any authority. It's like when you're afraid at a horror movie.
Okay.
And you're actually afraid. You know, the scary stuff happening, but you know it's not. You're not. You're not in danger. You also know that this is so you can go to a magic show, and you see the magician do magic, and your mind is blown. You're in awe.
Right.
Yeah, and skill can cause awe. You see Jimi Hendrix play guitar, and you're in awe.
Yes.
But you know that this is within that context, and this is not a proof of something that Scientology is correct.
Right.
So with the right expectations of assumptions, an awe experience, which normally would be a very fun, great experience, can be something that establishes a commitment.
Makes sense.
Okay, but
So this is the kind of basic psychology we're talking about that cultic belief systems are built on. Cultic recruitment processes are built on. Is this stuff, which is not, it doesn't have a value judgment. It's not good, it's not bad. Awe can be amazing. Awe can be the most amazing experiences of our life, are awesome experiences.
Yeah. And it's feelings of knowing, so epiphanies where you feel like you know something. That's central to the scientific project where Newton came up with the calculus, and he had a very strong awe experience, and it's good that he did. So but you need to know to to not trust it.
Right.
You need to know.
There's
that,
the lesson emerges, folks.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when you understand now, of course, with sufficient the situation, even I who understand this, if I'm in a gulag, if I'm in a re-education camp in the RPF, through stress, through sleep deprivation, I can have awe experience that can override,
Yes.
So with enough brutality, you can get those experiences. And people who are really severely stressed, they can get the Stockholm Syndrome, where they will either fall in love or become fervent towards anything that has a little bit of positivity coming from it, and because your mind, or like torture victims, or you latch to it as I know a Palestinian friend of mine who was tortured, and I won't do the detail because it's horrible, but at some point someone played an album as he was being sleep deprived in a stress position. Normally he would have just white noise or repetitive techno, but someone put actual music, Israeli Hebrew music. And if you see the Clockwork Orange, that
Yes.
movie, you would think in that situation he is being tortured, he's listening to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and he hates Beethoven's Ninth Symphony afterwards.
Yes.
In this case, the reality case, he loves that musician today.
Interesting.
Today, he'll sing along in a language he doesn't understand.
Wow. Because it's connected with an event
And
where...
he was in such a psychologically distressed that anything positive he latched onto. It's like Patty Hearst.
Right.
She was, the story, she was kidnapped. And after a couple of months that she was kidnapped, she was seen collaborating with her kidnappers, robbing a bank, right, with a gun that she was holding. But she tells it that she was locked in a closet for a few days, tied up, and in that psychological state, any little bit of affection, she fell in love with the guy that gave her the food. She became fervent towards the goal of this group that kidnapped her, and so she became a true believer. That's the Stockholm Syndrome. Right. And so with stress, you have a very strange situation where stress makes you more fervent, but a sufficiently stressful event can reset everything. Right. With the right expectations and assumptions. Right. Where you can have a fast conversion because it's so the things that induce awe, you have I categorize them as things that are sufficiently anomalous. Okay. Okay. So Coleridge gives us a poem. It's called "What If You Slept," and I think I'll probably get it. And it goes, "What if you slept, and what if in your sleep you dreamt, and what if in that dream you dreamt of a beautiful, special flower, and what if when you woke up, that flower was in your hand? Huh? What then?" Right? Now this is a very, so the what then is then Christianity was proved, then Islam was proved. Now this is so some people would say that vastness is a necessary aspect of what triggers awe. I think that the vastness is not necessary. It is so the person wakes up with the flower, they have an awe experience because because things are sufficiently anomalous. Yes. But what they feel is that they feel that God, let's say, for example, God was involved. Mm-hmm. And God is vast. Mm-hmm. So if you ask them, they would say that I had a vastness experience because of the miracle. But the miracle didn't have any vastness in it. You just, the miracle. Now, if you ask someone who saw a miracle, let's say you ask the apostles, you saw Jesus walk on the water, and say, well, Or you ask them, what did you see today? And say, I saw the Son of God. And you ask them, okay, how was it? And they're like, it was great, but obviously when you see the Son of God, you'll have an awe experience, right? And then you ask them, and how did you know? And then they say, oh, he walked on the water. But both the trigger, the walking on the water, and the emotional experience can be seen as a side effect. It's something that, of course, when you see the Son of God, and it could have been another miracle. But what's important is the conclusion. But they don't realize that the conclusion was reached because of the emotional experience. The emotional experience was not a side effect.
Right.
It actually was the reason why you felt like you have this certainty and all of that. So with the person who wakes up with the flower, this banal, miracle, it can be interpreted in a way that they think that vastness was involved.
Yes. Because
of the conclusions that they come from it. And the conclusions, but the vastness, I don't think that it's necessary in the trigger.
Okay. I related it immediately to, I was going to ask you, would this apply as well in a situation with Scientology where you have an interpreted out-of-body experience? Mm-hmm. And that's vast.
Yeah.
Because then people imagine
it feels vast,
all kinds of things, right? I can see the sun,
And it's neurologically, it is the vestibular system. So the vestibular sense is about motion and balance. Mm-hmm. So you feel like you're floating, you feel like you're light, you feel all these vestibular hallucinations that accompany many awe experiences.
Right.
But also falling in love. You can feel like you're lighter. You feel like you're on cloud 9.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing.
And many spiritual or religious or awe-related things are thought of as either weightless or floating, or souls, angels, gods, heaven.
Immediately, we're so built in to relate it to all of that stuff.
Yeah, and so those are all things that are related to vestibular.
What's happening is your brain's operating, guys. Well, that's what's going on.
But this and that's related to vastness.
Right.
Now, so the other things that can trigger awe can be things like a celebrity. Mm-hmm. It can be actual vastness. It can be metaphorical vastness, or like infinity or eternity, or some kind of vastness that is not sensual, but you think about it. It can be skill. It can be
observing skill in others, or demonstrating skill yourself in some fashion.
Usually it's in others, right? So it's something that it can be virtue. So you're observing someone acting very virtuously. You can have awe, but as I said earlier, also trauma and stressful events can trigger awe. But and you can ask why and awe is also there's terror in awe, right? So,
a little bit, yeah, because it's so much bigger and beyond you.
Yeah, it's but it can be reassuring sometimes. It can be so. If you ask how come both positive experiences and negative experiences can trigger this, but I think that if you look at the connection with love, both your child winning a prize can re-trigger your infatuation with the kid, but also your kid breaking a bone can re-trigger.
Right.
So we have the system that can be both with positive or negative, but with awe, expectations and assumptions and context are very, very important, and they can do all the difference.
Makes sense. Okay. Wow, we are doing good time here.
Yeah? How long?
Oh, no, I'm saying we should be wrapping up.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
And then I mean, and I can continue talking about this stuff.
Oh, no, this is great. No, this is great.
Yeah, I'm writing a book about it. I'm about to have the first chapter ready, and I'll put it online or on Facebook. So that's in the next week or so. So you can read that chapter. But other chapters will be coming, and then a book Monday.
Man. That's good. Excellent. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming and being part of this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, drove all the way down from Boulder.
Yes.
And folks, I hope you guys got something out of this. I sure as hell did. I mean, and I knew what was coming. So this was very, very interesting. It speaks to everything I've ever talked about on this topic. All of the things we talked about here are fundamental to critical thinking, to cult indoctrination and belief and recruitment and all the rest. But I hope you can also see how broadly all of this applies to every aspect of our lives. Because we're all involved with other people and with other groups, and our relationships are defined by the context of those situations and relationships. And so if we can be a little bit more aware of what those contexts are and some of the positive and negative consequences that could come from some of that, I think we can have slightly better lives. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please leave any questions, comments, or feedback that you have, and I am very interested in your feedback, in the comment section on my YouTube channel or at sensiblyspeaking.com. And as always, if you find this channel and the work I'm doing here informative, educational, and entertaining, then please consider joining me on Patreon. I could definitely use the support to keep the lights on and the show going here. Really, truly, it does matter and it does make a difference, and I very, very, very much appreciate the support that I get from my current Patreon supporters and those of you out there who even send me one-offs. So again, talk to you guys next week. Thanks for coming around. Bye-bye.